Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I am your host, Michael Clogs. The events that are happening in the Middle East, more specifically between the Gaza Strip and Israel, I will say it this way, and this is my own opinion of the events, that I don't understand how the leadership of the Hamas can think that this is a positive move for the people of Palestine. If anything, it hurts the people of Palestine to have a outright attack the way that they have done things. We have heard reports of them taking hostages. They're threatening to kill hostages if they are not heard the way they want to be heard. You're going to hear the ambassador to the United Nations from Israel speak about the Hamas directive that anyone who follows the Muslim faith should kill a Jewish person upon encounter. Let's say this about the Muslim faith. Basically, the teachings of the Quran are talk about a God who loves, not a God who wants his people to go and destroy in the name of vengeance. So something is wrong there. There's a whole lot that is happening that is just not right. Reports of grabbing people out of their beds, snatching them off the street so that they can have hostages to show the world is not right. At the same time, yes, we do need to do something about colonialism, that the people who were on the land when the colony was developed should have equal rights to those people who are there now. Israel was created through colonialism, and that should have an effect. But more than that, the people who are just living there now, that grew up there today, the average person doesn't want war. What they want is a peaceful existence. The average person doesn't want people raging streets and kidnapping people, holding them hostages, and threatening to kill. They also don't want their government doing the same thing. Emotions are high in Israel, and of course they want these families. They want their loved ones back, and they want their government to do whatever it takes to do so. We're going to hear a statement also from Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, that no one in Canada should be standing by and saying in agreement with the Hamas. That's probably very true that no one should be. And I will say this, that I have friends who, not to point them out, but I have friends that follow the Muslim faith, and they're not exactly for what happened. I also have friends, of course, who are Jewish. In fact, I find my background and my heritage and my ancestors are Jewish. I just happen to be Christian. And this isn't right. This is not the way to end the tyranny of colonialism. This is only a way to perpetuate hatred. And we need to find, as a human race, we need to find a way to end that hatred. So, we have clips, of course. I mentioned Justin Trudeau. I also mentioned the ambassador to the UN from Israel. And we also have what was said a few days ago on the UN press conference floor about events that are happening in our world, including those that are happening in Israel, and those who there's questions to be answered. What is happening? What can the UN do, the Security Council do, to bring those people home safely, to put them back in their homes safe and sound, and to negotiate a peaceful resolution to the Gaza Strip.
Good afternoon. The past days have been devastating for each and every Israeli. Israel suffered an unprecedented attack, and the number of casualties is catastrophic, truly unfathomable. Over the past 2 days, following Hamas's surprise attack on Israel, my country has suffered hundreds of fatalities. Yesterday, in the early morning of the Jewish Sabbath and on a Jewish holiday, savage Hamas terrorists fired thousands of rockets into Israel. But this was only the beginning. As rockets rained down indiscriminately upon Israeli towns and cities, hundreds of Hamas terrorists infiltrated Israel and began a barbaric pogrom of unparalleled magnitude. Ruthless terrorists gunned down innocent Israeli civilians in the streets, murdering anything that moved, anything. I'll show you just one example. Just look at this photo of bodies of women strewn in the street, in a bus stop. Innocents murdered in cold blood. These animal-like terrorists broke into homes, gathered entire families into rooms, and shot them point blank, as if they were stomping on insects. Grandparents and the elderly, among them Holocaust survivors who endured the Nazis, were violently dragged from their homes, this time by Hamas, and taken into Gaza. Can you get me the photo of the Holocaust survivor? זה לא פה, אני אומר זה לא. Look at this grandmother being forced to hold a Hamas terrorist rifle as he takes a picture with her. This is inhumane. Inhumane. Mothers and their babies, as well as babies separated from their mothers, were brutally taken hostage. Just look at this video now. This mother is crying as she clutches her two precious babies before being put on a truck to Gaza. These are war crimes, blatant, documented war crimes. But tragically, the abominations don't end here. Hamas terrorists happened upon an outdoor party of hundreds of young Israelis celebrating the holiday weekend. These savages gunned down Jewish revelers just like Nazi death squads in the 1940s. Hundreds were butchered, their bodies mutilated and defiled. And those who survived were taken to Gaza. Listen to this young girl screaming as she is kidnapped, separated from her friend, not knowing what fate awaits her. Try to comprehend the magnitude of this situation. Try to digest the ruthless inhumanity. I have seen shocking footage, graphic images that will forever be seared in my brain. What we are witnessing are war crimes, blatant, barbaric war crimes, slaughtering civilians, abusing hostages, taking babies from their mothers. There are no words to describe such savagery. I don't want to imagine what is happening right now to all of those innocent Israeli civilians being held captive in Gaza, the horrors they are enduring. Look at this, and do not forget it. The horrors. This is Israel's 9/11. This is Israel's 9/11, and Israel will do everything to bring our sons and daughters back home. These images are horrifying. They are hard to see, and they are impossible to fully internalize. But I'm showing you all of this for a reason. Today, many members of the international community are supporting Israel, yes. But if history has taught us anything, we know that tomorrow that may not be the case. The international community, and particularly the UN and the Security Council, have a very short memory when it comes to Israel. The terror that we endure quickly becomes a side note. But this time will not be the same. We will not let the world forget the atrocities our country suffered. I want you all to remember what sadistic evil Israel is currently at war with. The world must not forget what I have shown you today. Hamas is a genocidal Islamist jihadist terror organization. It is no different than ISIS. It is no different than Al-Qaeda. There is no reasoning with genocidal jihadists. They do not want dialogue. They do not want conversation. They want one thing and one thing only: the annihilation of the Jewish state. This is a direct quote from their charter. The day of judgment will not come until Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. This is the Hamas charter. And it also says that whenever a Muslim encounters a Jew, he must butcher him. That's the Hamas charter. Internalize this. They want to butcher me. They want to butcher my children, my people, and my nation. They will not stop until they murder every single one of us. And this is precisely why this atrocity is Israel's 9/11. From now, nothing will be as it was. I promise you. Today we are shattering the paradigm. We are changing the equation. For 17 years since Israel unilaterally withdrew from Gaza, and since Hamas came to power, the world has tried to reason with these terrorists, barbaric terrorists. The international community sought to rehabilitate Gaza, giving tens of billions of dollars in aid. Friends, these funds did not go to building schools or hospitals. It was exploited only for terror. Every inch of Gaza has become part of Hamas's war machine, a war machine. And you know it. Money is fungible. It enters Gaza and then it goes straight to building terror tunnels, rocket launch pads, missile manufacturing sites, and other terror infrastructure. Economic incentives cannot change genocidal ideologies. I repeat, economic incentives cannot change genocidal ideologies. It couldn't have worked with ISIS, it couldn't have worked with Al-Qaeda, and it doesn't work with Hamas. The era of reasoning with these savages is over. Over. Now is the time to obliterate Hamas's terror infrastructure, to completely erase it, so that such horrors are never committed again. And the international community must give Israel its full support. Mark my words, Israel may be under attack today, but this is not only a war against or on Israel. This is a war on the free world. It is a war on civilization. Israel is at the forefront of the war on terror, and if we do not succeed, the whole world will pay the price. As the Security Council prepares to meet today, Israel has one sole demand. Hamas's war crimes must be unequivocally condemned. This unimaginable atrocity must be condemned. Israel must be given steadfast support to defend ourselves, to defend the free world. Israel will not accept any false, immoral comparisons between a savage terror group that targets innocent and the democratic state of Israel. This is not the comparison that the UN or the Security Council can do. There is no reconciling with genocidal terrorists. Israel will exact a heavy price on Hamas so that what we witnessed will never repeat itself. In the wake of the Holocaust, the world swore never again. This very body, the UN, was established on the ashes of the Holocaust. Yet yesterday, we watched as hundreds of Jews were massacred in cold blood. This is a never again moment. We are a resilient people, and we have faced hardships in the past. We have always overcome our challenges, and today will be no different. Israel will fight back, and Israel will prevail. Thank you.
It's Pamela Falk from CBS News. Thank you for the briefing. Do you expect a unity statement out of the Council? And if not, which countries do you think might resist that? And can you tell us anything about hostages, including Israelis and Americans and other nationalities? Thank you.
What was your second question?
Are there American hostages?
Regarding American hostages, I can't get now into details. Obviously, it's an ongoing war now, and we have to be responsible now and double check everything, so I cannot comment on this question. Regarding our demands / expectations, as I said, it's hard to imagine countries objecting or our expectations, but we can never know. As I said, our only expectation is the obvious expectation that the UN that was founded, and especially the Security Council, to prevent wars, to fight terrorism, would and will condemn unequivocally the Hamas's atrocities and defend Israel's right to defend itself. That's it, as simple as it sounds.
Thank you. Yes, please, in the back. Your name?
Michelle Kellerman with National Public Radio. First of all, is there evidence that either Iran or other UN member states were involved at all in the planning for this? And secondly, are you asking the UN, the ICRC, any other international organization to help with regard to the hostages?
We cannot, and obviously we're not going to share our plans and military plans and strategy because it's a war, and we do not intend to share our plans with the enemy. What is your other question? Oh, regarding Iran. Let me say that, again, we don't want to share intelligence. We could see in the last few weeks, maybe that's a separate issue to discuss, we could see the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, and how he criticized any country that wants to normalize relations with Israel, how he declared that they want the annihilation of the Zionist regime, as he calls it. He tweeted many anti-Semitic posts and tweets, and we could see a few weeks ago that his president, the Iranian president, the butcher of Tehran, Raisi, met with the leadership of Hamas, and we know that there were meetings in Syria, in Lebanon, if I remember correctly, with other leaders of the terror armies that surround Israel. So obviously, it's easy to understand that they try to coordinate, the military, the terror armies, the terrorists, the proxies of Iran in our region. They try to be coordinated as much as possible with Iran, because for the long term, their goal is to try and destroy Israel with the nuclear umbrella that Iran will provide them with. That's the long-term goal.
Yes, please.
Ambassador. Hi, Margaret Bashir with Voice of America. Ambassador, you mentioned normalization of relations. Does this mean talks for Israel and Saudi Arabia to normalize are off the table indefinitely? And secondly, President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke today. Biden assured him of additional assistance to the IDF. Could you give us some details?
We are grateful to the support we receive from the American administration, from President Biden. We are fully coordinated with them. I'm fully coordinated with Ambassador Thomas Greenfield here, as I said, regarding, for example, that we don't expect to see any other statement coming from the Security Council unless it's the content that I just mentioned. We don't want to get into specifics again, but the administration is willing to assist Israel, and what was your first question?
On normalization with Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia, is that off the
Yeah,
table?
that's an important question. We don't see any reason that it should be off the table. Again, we believe that there's a moderate, there are moderate countries in our region that wants to normalize relations and live in peace and coexistence. And definitely Saudi Arabia is part of them. When Saudi Arabia was attacked by the Houthis, or when the UAE was attacked by the Houthis, another Iranian proxy in our region, we always condemned it, because I think that all moderate countries should stand together against radicalism, against terrorism. And obviously, that's what Iran wants to achieve, to separate us all. They definitely want to derail the chances of having normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. We still want it to happen. We'll do everything that we can to live in coexistence with all of our neighbors.
We have time for one more question.
Give two.
Ambassador Tawfiq with the BBC. This format, closed consultations, do you want to see an open of as long as there's a peace?
It's either being naive or more than being naive, because if I just describe to you and show you some quotes from the Hamas charter, and I don't remember anyone talking about achieving a peace agreement with Al-Qaeda or with ISIS. Peace cannot be achieved with an organization that its sole only goal is to destroy you and to butcher each and every one of your citizens. So it's only about fighting terrorism and radicalism. So therefore, we thought there's no room now to have a real discussion of the Security Council. Again, we are at a war now in Israel. We have hostages being kept in Gaza. We have a constant threat. They are still indiscriminately firing rockets and missiles at our towns and cities. So we are totally focused on achieving our goal to remove this threat from our citizens.
Meeting. I just want to make sure that I have that.
I don't see any reason now to hold an open meeting.
Time for one more question. Yes, please.
On hostages, there are reports. Paolo Mastrolilli with the Italian daily La Repubblica. On hostages, there are reports. Hostages, there are reports of a possible deal in exchange of restoring electricity, the freedom for children and women. Are you willing to consider something like that without getting into details?
We're not even dealing with it right now. As I said, we're not going to share any information or intelligence publicly. I believe you will see that Israel is determined, as I said, to bring back our boys, girls, babies, grandparents who were taken forcefully to Gaza. And we are determined to obliterate the terrorist infrastructure there that is threatening all of us and the future of Israel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is so important to see so many people gathering tonight, here, and in vigils like it across the country. Le chef de l'opposition officielle, Pierre, merci d'être ici ce soir. Le maire d'Ottawa, Mark Sutcliffe, les leaders communautaires, tout le monde ici ce soir. C'est important de se rassembler pour montrer notre solidarité envers nos amis israéliens durant ces moments incroyablement difficiles. First, let me begin by being absolutely clear. Canada, unequivocally and in the strongest possible terms, condemns these terrorist attacks perpetrated by Hamas. We stand with Israel and reaffirm our support for Israel's right to defend itself in accordance with international law. Le Canada condamne sans équivoque les attaques terroristes commises par le Hamas. On est solidaire d'Israël et on réitère notre appui au droit d'Israël de se défendre conformément au droit international. The attacks this weekend were brutal and horrific. We heard stories of people who were there at the music festival for peace when gunmen started shooting. We saw images of parents shielding their children to protect them from rockets. Women and kids have been forced out of their homes and kidnapped. The images and the imagining what it must have been. Middle of the night, as doors were kicked in, people ripped from their beds. It's unimaginable. We know that even Holocaust survivors were kidnapped. The indiscriminate killing of civilians, the sexual violence, the violence against women, children, and elderly people, these acts are sickening and completely unimaginable. On demande la libération immédiate des otages et on exige qu'ils soient traités conformément au droit international. La violence envers la population civile n'est jamais acceptable. The glorification of death and violence and terror has no place anywhere, including, especially, here in Canada. So let me be very clear. Hamas terrorists aren't a resistance. They're not freedom fighters. They are terrorists, and no one in Canada should be supporting them, much less celebrating them. I want to thank everyone coming out across the country to show their support. Just a few weeks ago, I was in Toronto to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. We talked about all the uncertainty in the world right now. We talked about the importance of being there for one another. We talked about the examples of Jewish Canadians embodying the concept of tikkun olam, commitment to make the world a better place, healing the world. We talked about our hopes for a better year, a better future. But what happened this weekend during a Jewish holiday on Shabbat was the opposite of hope. It was dark, abhorrent, and heinous. Nearly every Jewish Canadian has friends or family in Israel. Les députés, les membres de notre gouvernement et de nos équipes qui sont de confession juive, tout comme tellement d'entre vous ici ce soir, vous avez de la famille et des amis en Israël. Les liens au sein de cette communauté sont justement ce qui la rend aussi forte et incroyable. The interconnectedness of this community is what makes it so strong and incredible, but it is also what makes it so difficult right now. You're feeling so close yet so far away. You're talking to relatives. You're scrolling social media. You want to be able to help directly. My friends, you are not alone. Canadians stand with the Jewish community. Canadians stand with Israel, and we stand ready to support the Israeli people. There is a Hebrew proverb that says that the community is Israel's rampart. That's true in so many ways. I saw a tweet earlier from CIJA that showed volunteers in Tel Aviv packaging food, clothing, and aid for the victims. Ici, au pays, les communautés juives se mobilisent pour recueillir des fonds pour aider les Israéliens. Et on voit des exemples d'entraide ici et à travers le monde. The world is in a very dark place right now. Standing up, united for our values is more important than ever. If we want to win against terrorists dictators and bullies. Upholding the rule of law must continue to be our rampart. Protecting civilian life must continue to be our rampart. And as you know very well, being there for one another will always be our strongest rampart against hatred. We stand with you, my friends, tonight, tomorrow, and every day. Merci, mes chers amis.
All right, let me just give you a bit more. First, we'll start with the region, and I'll start with Lebanon. Our peacekeeping colleagues in UNIFIL report they've detected explosions at Al Bustan in southwest Lebanon this afternoon. While they're working to gather more information, the head of the mission and the force commander, General Haroldo Lazzaro Sainz, is in contact with the parties, urging them to exercise maximum restraint and utilize the mission's liaison and coordination mechanisms to prevent further risks of escalation and loss of life. In addition to leadership being in constant contact with the authorities, both in Lebanon and in Israel since the events began, UN peacekeepers in Lebanon have remained present along the Blue Line to maintain stability. They've also adapted and enhanced their presence throughout the area of operations, including counter-rocket launching capabilities. Our humanitarian colleagues, just turning to Gaza, our humanitarian colleagues report over 120,000 people have been internally displaced in Gaza due to concerns over the protection and destruction of homes. You've heard the Secretary General on what we're seeing already in Gaza. 6 healthcare workers have also been killed and 4 others were injured, with 7 healthcare facilities and 9 ambulances damaged. In Gaza, damage to water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities has undermined services to more than 400,000 people. The Gaza power plant is now the only source of electricity and could run out of fuel within days. Also, as of today, the World Food Program has begun distributing food to up to 100,000 internally displaced Gazans who are seeking refuge in UNRWA shelters with fresh bread and canned food. In the next few days, the WFP plans on starting to roll out assistance to up to 800,000 people with food and cash assistance as the situation develops, provided the necessary funding is made available. WFP needs $16.8 million to reach 805,000 people in the next month. For its part, UNRWA says they're sheltering about 137,000 people in 83 of its schools in all areas of the Gaza Strip. An UNRWA school sheltering displaced families in the Gaza Strip was directly hit over the weekend. The school was severely damaged. It was housing about 225 people, though no casualties were recorded among the displaced, but the school sustained significant and structural damage. All UNRWA schools across the Gaza Strip are closed. More than 300,000 students are impacted. Okay, just moving on to Afghanistan. We, along with our humanitarian partners, are now ramping up to the response following the 6.3 magnitude earthquake which struck Herat province in the west of the country on Saturday. Our humanitarian colleagues note that the epicenter of the earthquake was in Zindanjan district, where reports indicate that 100% of the homes have been destroyed. According to community-level assessments, nearly 1,300 people have died and 1,700 were injured in Zindanjan province. In total, an estimated more than 12,000 men, women, and children have been impacted across the 5 districts in Herat province. Several hundred households have been also displaced to Herat city. The figure is likely to rise in the coming days as search and rescue efforts and assessments continue. We've deployed assessment teams, and we are providing emergency shelter supplies, blankets, warm clothes, food, hygiene kits, water buckets, chlorine, and dignity kits to those who need it. Our partners have also deployed health teams and are providing trauma and emergency surgery kits. The humanitarian coordinator for Afghanistan, Danielle Andres, has approved an emergency reserve allocation from the Afghan Humanitarian Fund of $5 million to support the immediate relief efforts in the earthquake-impacted areas. This morning, the Security Council heard from Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. She noted that in recent weeks, civilians and civilian infrastructure across Ukraine have remained under nearly constant fire. Ms. DiCarlo also said the immediate impact of such attacks is just as clear as the fact that international humanitarian law obligates parties to armed conflict to protect non-combatants. She stressed that we will not waver in calling for accountability for anyone responsible for harming civilians during hostilities. Also briefing was Joyce Misuya, the number 2 at the Department of Humanitarian Affairs. She said since the attack on Gaza, the UN and humanitarian organizations have been on the scene alongside local Ukrainian authorities to ensure that people receive some support in face of these atrocious attacks. Ms. Masuya warned that winter is yet again upon the people of Ukraine, adding that it is disturbing to see that attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have already been reported over the past weeks. Both remarks have been shared with you. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our peacekeeping colleagues there are telling us that they are reinforcing their presence in Kinshasa in North Kivu province to protect civilians caught in clashes between the M23 and members of other armed groups. Over the weekend, fresh fighting between these groups forced tens of thousands of people to flee their homes. Approximately 2,000 people have sought refuge within the UN's missions base at Kinshasa, and 18,000 men, women, and children have taken shelter just outside the base. For its part, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that since the 1st of October, clashes in Masisi territory, North Kivu, have displaced nearly 85,000 people. This brings the total number of displaced in the province to more than 2 million. These newly uprooted people have sought refuge in safer locations, including in other parts of Masisi territory and in Rutshuru. They've settled with host families or sheltering at collective centers. Most of them are living in very precarious conditions, as one can only imagine. As a result of the clashes, road traffic is restricted between Goma and Kinshasa. Many of our humanitarian partners have suspended their movements to Kinshasa and the surrounding area as a result of the fighting. Turning to Somalia, the humanitarian coordinator there tells us that about 100,000 people have been impacted by last week's heavy rains and flash floods in the southern district of Baidoa. Shelters for more than 86,000 internally displaced people in 136 settlements were submerged, with most of them still flooded as we speak. In addition to shelter support, people impacted by the floods need food, water, and medical care. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that El Niño is expected to bring more rains and more flooding to Somalia through December, with at least 1.2 million people in riverine areas likely to be impacted by those heavy rains and flooding. We, along with our humanitarian partners, have worked with the government to develop emergency preparedness and response plans, and the Somalia Fund has allocated $15 million for early action on flooding. But additional resources are urgently needed. This year's humanitarian appeal for Somalia is just 37% funded. And turning to Ethiopia, World Food Program says it has begun rolling out food distribution to nearly 900,000 refugees in Ethiopia following a full revamp of safeguards and controls at its refugee operations. Families living in refugee camps across 5 regions, including new arrivals who fled from Sudan, are receiving food parcels for the first time since WFP paused food distribution in June of this year following reports of large-scale diversions of humanitarian supplies. WFP said around 35,000 people who fled from Sudan to Ethiopia in the last 6 months urgently require food assistance, while Ethiopia also hosts a further 850,000 refugees, mostly from Somalia, South Sudan, and Eritrea. The resumption of food distribution for refugees follows major reforms in all camps across the country. Just a quick update from Armenia. Over the weekend, the UN Refugee Agency with other UN agencies and non-governmental organization partners have appealed for over $97 million to provide urgent humanitarian aid and protection to refugees and those generously hosting them in Armenia in support of the government-led response. The Armenia Emergency Refugee Response Plan was launched over the weekend. It covers relief efforts in a 6-month period until the end of March 2024. The joint plan aims to support 231,000 people, including 136,000 refugees and 95,000 members of local host communities. The plan takes into account the upcoming harsh winter months when critical support will be required. And yesterday, UNHCR said another 2 trucks with humanitarian aid arrived in Armenia, carrying essential items such as blankets, foldable beds, mattresses, hygiene items, solar lamps, and kitchen sets. We're almost there. In Kyoto, Japan, the Internet Governance Forum is underway. Today, the Secretary General addressed the forum in a video message and said we need to keep harnessing digital technologies enabled by the Internet to help deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals, take climate action, and build a better world. He also underscored the need to close the connectivity gap around the world and reinforce a human rights and human-centered approach to digital cooperation. It is imperative that the Internet, including the physical infrastructure that underpins it, remains open, secure, and accessible to all. His remarks were shared with you. And sometimes we make mistakes in this office. Last week, I erroneously announced to you that it was official World Post Day. In fact, today is World Post Day. The letter was late. Sorry. Not a pretty grim day all around. Edie.
Thank you very much, Scott. A couple of follow-ups on the Mideast. Could you give us some specifics on what the UN and the Secretary General are doing to prevent a spillover of the current conflict between Israel and Hamas into the broader region? And can you also give us some details on the size of the UN staff in Gaza? I assume that they can't leave.
Sure.
And
how? Let's stop there for now because otherwise I'll forget everything you've asked me. A couple of things. On the political activity, the Secretary General and his special coordinator have been in close contact with international and regional actors, doing whatever to further the aim of a spillover. And I think the Secretary General mentioned that in his remarks. Just to give you some details, the Secretary General has spoken to President Herzog. He expects to speak to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Also expects to speak to President Abbas today. He'll be speaking shortly with President Sisi. He already spoke to the King of Jordan, and we're also expecting him to speak to the Prime Minister of Lebanon. For his part, Mr. Veneslan has been in touch with his counterparts from the U.S., from the European Union, from Egypt, Qatar, and Lebanon, and others. In terms of staff members, we have 13,000 colleagues, UNRWA colleagues, in Gaza, national and international. The vast majority are national in Gaza. UNRWA has another about 4,000 staff members in the occupied West Bank. So those are plus we have, I'd say, in terms of internationals, probably about around 300 in Gaza. They are not able to They're obviously not able to leave. They are focused on trying to do whatever they can to help the population within their mandate.
And two quick follow-ups on that. With all of the aerial bombardments going on at the moment, are they able to deliver any kind of assistance to, you're talking about trying to get 800,000 people given assistance. How are you going to be able to do that? And who will represent the UN or be on the sidelines at the Arab League foreign ministers meeting in Cairo on Wednesday?
On your last question, I don't know. I will find out if we will have if we have a presence there. On the aid, I think, as I just read out, WFP is already starting to roll out food distribution. UNRWA is doing whatever it can to feeding people that are in their sheltering in their schools. Ibtisam.
Thank you, Steph. Just a quick follow-up on the last point. I thought the Israelis announced a total siege so that no one can get in and out.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, sorry.
But when you say the UNRWA is starting to, or will start
It's stuff that's pre-positioned. We have supplies that are pre-positioned. Those supplies are not endless, right? So at some point in the not too distant future, we will run out of supplies unless more supplies can come in.
And my question is, when hearing the Secretary General today, I think for a lot of Palestinians, they would say that they have the feeling that there is a double standard, the way also the UN is dealing with the Palestinian issue compared to, for example, Ukraine. And if I look at his speech, he's talking, when it comes to killed Palestinian civilians, he's talking about being alarmed. But when it comes to killed Palestinian Israeli civilians, he's condemning that. So how do you explain that?
I think the Secretary General and all of us are heartbroken at the loss of any civilian life. I mean, and you can do an analysis of the terminology that has been used over the years. The loss of civilian life is exactly that, and is to be deplored.
Yeah, but I mean, sorry, I have to push back, but you are not using the same words to describe the loss of civilian life, and that's a fact. That's
I'm not arguing the fact. I'm just, we say what we say. As I said, we leave it to you to analyze. I feel I've answered the question to the best of my ability.
Okay, I have a follow-up regarding the school, the UNRWA school that was attacked. If I'm remembering right, UNRWA school and UN facilities are always very well known for the Israelis. So is this also the case in this? I mean, that there are civilians there?
You're very correct. There is a deconfliction process that exists. This is sadly not the first time that we're seeing that the people of Gaza are seeing this, and it's not the first time that UNRWA has had to deal with it. UN premises are indeed well known. As I said, there's a deconfliction mechanism with the Israeli authorities. We're not in a position to know whether it was targeted or if it was a mistake. What we do know is that it was hit, and that UN schools should not be hit in any way, in any manner or form. Benno, then Pam, then Deji.
Thank you, Steph. Just to follow up to Ibtisam, when you say pre-positioned, you mean inside the Gaza Strip,
yes, that's
right?
exactly what I mean.
And then my question is, the EU Commission announced that it would freeze all aid to Palestinians. I am not exactly sure if this also contains money for UNRWA. Do you?
Well, we would very much hope that the funding for UN activities in the occupied Palestinian territory and in Gaza, including UNRWA, be protected.
Does that mean you didn't get any notice so far?
I think we're seeing the developments as you're seeing them. We appeal that funding for critical UN work, as I've just laid it out, is protected. Pam, then Benno, then Mike.
Thanks, Steph. Of the
Sorry, Deji, Benno, Benny.
whatever.
I confuse them all the time. I know.
Yeah, right. The 13,000 UNRWA staff,
Yeah?
right? Isn't that what you just said?
Yes, ma'am.
In Gaza.
Indeed.
And have they been asked to leave? I mean, is there
I mean, the vast
safety?
majority are Palestinians who
Palestinians.
live in Gaza. It's their home as well as their workplace.
Right.
No one can
Is
leave.
there any way to, I mean, are you doing anything to
Well,
protect?
we're trying to do whatever we can to keep our people safe, and our people also doing whatever they can to help the people they are mandated to help.
All right, and in terms of travel to the Middle East, needless to say, this is not the moment, but this Secretary General and previous, you were on the one that I was on with Ban Ki-moon to Khan Yunis. Is there any interest in getting to the region?
I have nothing to share with you on that at this moment.
Okay.
Deji, and then Mike.
Couple questions. First, just now the Secretary General mentioned the Hamas attack is an act of terror, so this is a terrorist attack. Is that
Those
correct?
are the words he used, yes.
Okay, so the Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Netanyahu, said it's a war now. Does the UN think this is now a war?
I think what we are extremely concerned about is a level of tension that we've not seen before, a level of violence that we have not seen before, and a risk of spillover that we have not seen before in the recent past.
Does the Secretary General think that he's talked to President Abbas of Palestine could really give this situation under control, especially for Hamas?
I think the Secretary General needs to speak to whomever he needs to speak to, and he's doing it at his level. The special coordinator is doing the same at his level.
And one last question, a follow-up on Ibtisam's question. You know, when I came here in this room, I've never heard anything about the condemnation of the Israelis' act on the Palestinians. You only condemned Palestinians' attack on Israel. Do you think the UN bears responsibility for today's attack because of this double standard and incompetence?
No.
But you didn't
No,
do anything.
you're asking me a question, Deji,
yeah, exactly.
and my answer is no. Mike.
Well, thank you, Steph. Two questions for you. Number one, you mentioned there's a deconfliction mechanism to try to avoid Israeli strikes on UN facilities in Gaza. Is there any kind of mechanism to ensure, because we've seen it documented, well documented in the past, that Hamas and other terror groups are not occupying those facilities at any given time? How does that work? Is there any alert between UN personnel on the ground?
We have made it perfectly clear that UN premises should obviously not be targeted, but should not be used as offensive cover, so to speak. And that message has been passed on over and over again. We're seeing it in the Palestinian camp in Lebanon, where we've called on the armed groups to leave the school.
Is there a procedure in place, though,
I
to
mean,
make
there's
sure that
messages
civilians...
it is not acceptable for UN premises to be used by armed groups to shelter weapons or to launch offensive.
Is there a procedure in place, though?
Yes, I mean, the messages are passed. We live there, yeah.
Does the UN personnel on the ground say to those civilians, hey, this is not safe anymore because this is now occupied by militant forces? How does that work?
We asked the militant forces not to use the UN premises. We need to do whatever we can to keep those civilians who are seeking shelter in UN premises safe.
One last question
Yes,
for
sir.
you. Especially during these conflicts, proportionality is often talked about. I know the Secretary General was upset at Israeli actions in Jenin a few months ago during counterterrorism operations there against Hamas militants. 800 dead, beheadings, rapes, kidnappings of children. What does the Secretary General deem as a proportionate response to this?
It's not for him to set a proportionate response. I think if you look at what the Secretary General just said, I think you'll find the answer to your question. Nabil. And then Sherwin. and Madame, and everybody. Yeah.
I'm trying to read the SG's statement carefully. I don't see that he called for a ceasefire, right? Does he call for a ceasefire?
We want to see an end to this cycle of violence.
No, because in his statement he called on the Hamas and Jihad to stop their attacks and release the hostages immediately. Does he also call on Israel?
We would like to see an end to this cycle of violence.
And is the UN doing anything to mediate between the parties on the hostages now?
We are. I will just leave it to say that Mr. Venesland is in touch at the working level with a number of parties.
And on the political level, does the SG have a plan of action? I mean, obviously he's calling for a negotiated solution, but for the immediate situation, can you share with us if he has any plan of action, how to start the de-escalation?
We need to see the international community and those in the region who have influence over the parties to all speak with one voice, and that's the aim of the phone calls that he's making and that Tor Venesland is making.
Thank you for listening to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I don't know how to stress this hard enough that we, as a human race, we have to stand for love and put hatred behind us. I don't have any better final thoughts than that on what is happening in our world today. We have, as human beings, we have great capacity to love, and we don't need to destroy each other to prove a point. Please find that subscribe button wherever it may be. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.